"Doctor, are you sure you checked everything properly? I just can't fall asleep at night without my tea," the wife complained. The doctor looked at her closely and asked a pointed question. "Tell me, does your husband make the tea for you?" Surprised, the wife nodded silently. "My advice to you is this: do not drink what he brings you tonight." The wife scoffed at the doctor's words, but she decided to test his theory and pretended to be asleep. And when she saw what her husband did that night, her entire world shifted. Keisha Vance had married Marcus 7 years ago. They met at a master class dedicated to the art of chocolate making. At that moment, she was already working as an executive chef in a high-end restaurant, while Marcus was just starting his career in the culinary world. A spark ignited between them, which soon grew into a serious relationship. A year ago, Marcus was fired from the small diner where he ran the kitchen, and Keisha offered her husband a job under her supervision. After that, their relationship began to crumble gradually. Keisha stood in the middle of the kitchen at the Garnet, holding the printed menu for the evening in her hands. Her gaze slid over the lines, checking every dish, every ingredient. 100 people. It was the anniversary of a major construction company, an event that had to go perfectly. She inhaled the scent of fresh herbs drifting from the walk-in cooler and felt that familiar rush of excitement waking up inside her. She loved these evenings most of all, when she could display all her talent, all the mastery she had accumulated over years of hard work. "Listen up, everyone," her voice cut through the hum of the kitchen. "We have a major banquet tonight, 100 guests. Every dish must go out perfectly, no delays, no mistakes." The cooks and prep assistants froze, turning toward her. Keisha scanned her team. Young Trey, who had only recently joined them and still got nervous with large orders, the experienced Latoya, who could chop vegetables with her eyes closed, and Marcus, her husband, standing at the far workstation with an unreadable expression on his face. "Trey, you are on appetizers today." Keisha began distributing duties. "Tartare, carpaccio, everything as usual. Latoya, sides and sauces are under your control." She paused, shifting her gaze to her husband. "Marcus, you are on steaks today, and I will handle dessert." Marcus didn't even raise his head. He continued laying out knives at his station as if he hadn't heard her words. "You are such a pain," he muttered under his breath, but loud enough for Keisha to catch the tone. She felt something clench inside her. For the last few weeks, a strange tension had reigned between them, which Keisha tried not to notice. Work, fatigue, routine, she blamed it all on that. But right now, on the eve of an important event, she had absolutely no desire to dig into the reasons for his dissatisfaction. "What did you say?" she asked, taking a step in his direction. Marcus finally looked up. For a moment, their eyes met, and Keisha saw something cold, almost hostile in his gaze. But he quickly pulled himself together, plastering a semblance of a smile on his face. "Okay, I'm on it," he replied in an even tone, and turned to the refrigerator. Keisha frowned, but decided not to continue this conversation. Not now, not here, in front of the whole team. She looked at the menu again, trying to concentrate on work. "Does everyone understand their tasks?" she asked louder. "First courses must go out at exactly 7 in the evening. We have 4 hours for prep. Let's get started." The kitchen came alive. The clinking of knives against cutting boards, the hissing of oil in pans, the gurgling of water filled the air. Trey started breaking down fish for the tartare. His movements were uncertain, but diligent. Latoya was already chopping onions for the demi-glace sauce. Her hands moved with mesmerizing precision, while Marcus silently took marbled beef out of the fridge. His face remained impenetrable. Keisha went to her station and started preparing the batter for the dessert. She planned to make chocolate fondant with raspberry coulis and fresh mint leaves. A simple but effective dish that always impressed the guests. Her hands moved automatically, sifting flour, melting chocolate in a double boiler, whisking eggs. She had repeated these movements thousands of times. They calmed her, allowed her to disconnect from everything else. The smell of melted chocolate filled the kitchen, mixing with the aroma of frying onions and fresh herbs. Keisha closed her eyes, inhaling this symphony of scents. This was exactly why she loved her profession. for the opportunity to create something beautiful, something that brought people joy. "LaToya, how is the sauce?" she asked without looking up from her work. 10 more minutes and it'll be ready," she replied. "Excellent. Trey, don't forget the lemon juice in the tartare, and go easy on the salt. Last time you overdid it." "Yes, chef," the young cook replied, blushing. Time flew by unnoticed. Keisha was molding the desserts when Mr. Henderson, the restaurant manager, peeked into the kitchen. A tall, thin man in his 50s, with carefully styled gray hair, he always appeared at the most inconvenient moment. "How is the process going?" he asked, scanning the kitchen with his critical gaze. Keisha didn't lift her head, continuing to pour the batter into the molds. "Everything is great," she tossed out. "Will you be on time?" Mr. Henderson walked closer, looking over her shoulder. Keisha felt a flash of irritation inside. She couldn't stand it when someone invaded her space during work, especially when that someone was Mr. Henderson, who had no idea how a kitchen was run, but considered it his duty to constantly control everything. "Yes, we will serve the entrees on time," she answered, not hiding the annoyance in her voice. Mr. Henderson grunted but said nothing. He stood a little longer, watching the team work, and then turned around and left. Keisha exhaled with relief. She was the star of this restaurant, and she knew it perfectly well. People came here from other cities just to try her food. She had her own secrets, her signature techniques that she didn't reveal to anyone, not even Marcus. Culinary art was not something that could be bought or stolen. It was a gift that you either had or you didn't. "Keisha, where are the molds for the fondant?" LaToya asked. "Bottom cabinet on the left," she answered, continuing to work. The kitchen hummed like a well-oiled machine. Everyone knew their business. Everyone was focused on their task. Keisha felt like the conductor of an orchestra, managing this harmonious symphony of sounds and smells. She stole a glance at Marcus. He stood at the stove, searing steaks. His movements were precise, calculated, but they lacked that passion, that fire that Keisha put into every single one of her dishes. She remembered how they met 7 years ago at that chocolate masterclass. Back then, he seemed so passionate, so sincere to her. When he talked about food, his eyes lit up. And now he was just doing a job, mechanically, without soul. "Marcus, don't overcook the meat," she said, passing by. "For medium steaks, you need the exact temperature." He didn't even turn to her. "I know," he grumbled. Keisha pressed her lips together, but remained silent. Now was not the time to sort out their relationship. The clock showed 6:45 when the first dishes started leaving the kitchen. Waiters scurried back and forth, carrying away plates of appetizers. Keisha monitored every detail. Was the tartare plated correctly? Was there enough greenery on the garnish? Had the sauce cooled down? "Trey, this plate is going back," she said, pointing to one of the dishes. "See, there is too much lemon juice here. It's running onto the rim of the plate. Redo it." The young cook nodded guiltily and took the plate. The event proceeded in a calm atmosphere. The guests in the dining room were happy. Waiters passed compliments to the chef. Keisha felt satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. Her team worked flawlessly. Every dish came out on time and looked perfect. When it was time for dessert, she personally checked every portion of the fondant. The chocolate center had to be liquid, but not too runny. She cut into one of the test fondants, and a perfectly viscous chocolate mass flowed out of it. Keisha smiled. It turned out exactly as she had intended. "Great," she said to LaToya, who was helping her with plating. "We can send them out." The desserts went into the dining hall, and Keisha finally allowed herself to catch her breath. She took off her apron, wiped her hands, and leaned against the workstation. The hardest part was behind them. Half an hour later, Mr. Henderson appeared in the kitchen again, this time with a satisfied smile on his face. "Keisha, they are asking you to come out to the guests," he said. "They want to thank you personally." She nodded, quickly fixed her hair, and headed into the dining hall. Guests in expensive suits and dresses sat at a large table. They were chatting animatedly, laughing. When Keisha entered, several people applauded. A man in his 60s with a sturdy build, a confident gaze, and a firm handshake approached her. Mr. Sterling, he introduced himself, the owner of the construction company. I wanted to personally thank you for an amazing dinner, especially the dessert. It was something incredible. Thank you, Keisha smiled. I am glad you liked it. Liked it is an understatement, Mr. Sterling continued, not letting go of her hand. I have been to many places, tried dishes from various chefs, but yours, they are special. If you ever want to earn more, I would enjoy inviting you to work for me as a private chef. Keisha thought for a moment. The offer was tempting. Surely he would pay much more than the restaurant. But she immediately dismissed the thought. Working as a private chef meant cooking for one person day in and day out, making the same things. It would be boring. I don't think I would be cooking as much with you as I do here, she shrugged, and I would get bored, so I have to decline. Mr. Sterling laughed. A pity, truly a pity, but I understand. Talents like you aren't made for solitary work. Still, he took a business card out of his pocket and handed it to her. If you change your mind, call me. Keisha took the card and nodded. She returned to the kitchen, where her team was already cleaning up. A mountain of dirty dishes towered in the sink. Workstations were splashed with water and food scraps. It was the inevitable routine after every big event. Marcus was washing pans at the sink. Keisha walked up to him, still holding Mr. Sterling's card in her hand. Great work today, she said, trying to make contact. He didn't answer, continuing to scrub the pan with a metal brush. Keisha sighed and was about to leave when he suddenly pulled her aside, away from the others. Maybe you could recommend me to that millionaire as a private chef? He asked quietly, but she could feel the tension in his voice. Keisha looked at him in surprise. She had expected a question like that. Honey, you don't want to get mixed up with people like that, she answered cautiously. Why? Something resembling anger flashed in his eyes. Why do you always decide for me? I just don't want you to make a mistake, Keisha began to explain. But Marcus had already turned away. He went back to the sink, and Keisha was left standing alone, clutching the business card in her hands and feeling anxiety growing inside her. Something was wrong. Something in their relationship was breaking, and she didn't know how to stop it. The workday ended later than usual. Keisha changed in the locker room, taking off her sweat-soaked uniform and pulling on comfortable jeans and a sweater. She felt a pleasant fatigue in her body, the kind that comes after a job well done. The banquet had gone flawlessly. The guests were satisfied, which meant she had proven her mastery once again. Leaving the restaurant, she saw Marcus, who was already sitting in their car, staring at his phone. Keisha opened the door and sat in the passenger seat, bringing with her the faint scent of spices that always clung to her clothes after a shift in the kitchen. I'm dog-tired, she exhaled, buckling her seatbelt. But everything went great. Did you see how happy Mr. Sterling was? He even gave me a compliment. Marcus silently started the car. The engine purred quietly, and they drove out of the parking lot onto the almost empty night street. Streetlights illuminated the road with a yellowish glow, reflecting in puddles from the recent rain. You know, I've been thinking, Keisha continued, leaning back against the seat. We need a vacation. Seriously? When was the last time we went anywhere? 2 years ago, probably. Marcus remained silent, looking intently at the road. His hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary. I want to go to the beach, Keisha said dreamily, looking out the window at the passing houses. Can you imagine? Warm sand, waves, no kitchen, no stoves or frying pans. Just you, me, and the ocean. Maybe we could go to Greece or Italy? I've been dreaming of trying real Italian food for a long time. Not restaurant food, but homemade, the kind they cook in small villages. She turned to her husband, expecting some reaction, but his face remained like stone. Keisha frowned. Marcus, did something happen? She asked, trying to look into his eyes. No, he threw out dryly, not taking his gaze off the road. I can see that something is wrong, Keisha insisted, turning her whole body toward him. You've been distant all evening. Even in the kitchen you barely talked to me. What is going on? Marcus sharply turned the steering wheel, turning onto their street. The car skid slightly, and Keisha instinctively grabbed the handle above the door. "Careful!" she exclaimed. "It's fine," he hissed through his teeth. They drove another few yards in silence. Keisha felt anxiety building inside her. She had known her husband for 7 years, knew every intonation, every gesture, and right now she saw that he was on the verge of a breakdown. "Listen," she began softer, trying to reach him. "If I did something wrong, tell me. We are adults, we can talk." Marcus slammed on the brakes before a traffic light. The red light flooded the interior of the car, making his face even gloomier. "Listen," he finally exhaled, not looking at her. "I understand that you are the star of the kitchen. Everyone praises you, everyone adores you, but I am tired of being in your shadow." Keisha opened her mouth, but he didn't let her get a word in. "Even now," Marcus continued, his voice getting louder, "when there is an opportunity to change the scenery and make more money, you continue being stubborn. Don't you want me to get recognition too?" He turned to her, and in his eyes, she saw a mixture of pain and anger. "Is it really so hard to recommend me to that millionaire?" The traffic light switched to green, but Marcus didn't move. Behind them, someone honked impatiently. "Honey," Keisha began, choosing her words carefully, "I just don't want you to get into a bad situation. I heard about this Mr. Sterling. LaToya told me he changes chefs very often. Who knows for what reasons he does that?" The car finally moved, but the tension in the cabin only grew. "He could have just had a conflict with previous chefs," Marcus parried. "Or they couldn't handle their duties. Why do you immediately think the worst?" "Because I know you," Keisha replied softly. "You don't like conflict. You don't know how to defend your boundaries. And people like Mr. Sterling, they are used to everything being at their command. I love you, and I worry about you. Is that bad?" Marcus snorted, and the sound seemed almost insulting. "It seems to me you're just afraid I'll become better than you." Keisha froze. She hadn't expected to hear that. For a moment, a heavy silence hung in the car, broken only by the hum of the engine and the noise of passing cars. "What?" She finally exhaled and laughed, but the laugh came out nervous, unnatural. "Baby, I would only be happy about that. If you become a great chef, I will be the first to congratulate you." She paused, looking at his tense profile. "It's just," she continued quieter, "on your own, you're unlikely to come up with something original, and to earn people's recognition, you need to constantly change something. Experiment. Take risks." The words hung in the air, and Keisha immediately regretted them. She saw Marcus's jaw clench. Those words hurt him. She understood that. But it was the truth. Marcus really was conservative. Every time Keisha suggested trying a new recipe, adding an unusual ingredient, or changing the plating, he grimaced and refused. He preferred time-tested options, classic combinations. And there was nothing wrong with that. Many people liked his food. But to become a star, you needed more. You needed that spark of madness that forced you to experiment, to try the impossible. "I get it," Marcus muttered, driving into the courtyard of their apartment complex. He parked at the entrance and killed the engine. For a few seconds, they sat in silence. Keisha tried to think of what to say, how to smooth over the situation, but the words wouldn't come. "I need to be alone with my thoughts," Marcus suddenly said, staring straight ahead. "Go home. I'm going to a bar." "Marcus, wait, let's—" But he had already started the engine again. Keisha barely had time to jump out of the car before he stepped on the gas. The vehicle peeled away with screeching tires and disappeared around the corner, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the courtyard with her bag in her hands. Keisha looked at her watch, midnight. She sighed, threw her bag over her shoulder, and headed to the entrance. The elevator wasn't working. She had to walk up the stairs to the 4th floor. Her apartment met her with silence and darkness. She turned on the light, kicked off her shoes in the hallway, and walked into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table, laying her head on her arms. Fatigue crashed down all at once, both physical and emotional. What was happening to their marriage? Before they were so close, understood each other without words, and now it was like a wall had grown between them, and this wall started appearing exactly a year ago when she offered Marcus the job at her restaurant. Keisha remembered how sure she was back then that she was doing the right thing. Marcus had been fired from a diner on the outskirts of the city where he ran the kitchen. She thought working together would bring them closer, that they could spend more time together. But it turned out the opposite. She stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. Marcus's car was nowhere to be seen. Where was he right now? In which bar? With whom? And most importantly, when would he return? Keisha tried calling him, but the phone was off, or he just wasn't picking up. She texted, "Sorry if I said something wrong. Come home. Let's talk calmly." The message went through but wasn't read. The clock showed 1 in the morning, then 2, then 3. Keisha lay in bed, unable to fall asleep. She listened to every sound, hoping to hear the door open, the floorboards creak in the hallway, but the house was silent. She got up and brewed herself some chamomile tea, hoping it would help her calm down. She sat on the sofa in the living room, covered with a blanket, and turned on the TV to minimum volume. Faces slid across the screen, voices sounded, but she didn't perceive what was happening. Her thoughts revolved around one thing: their fight in the car. Maybe she really was too harsh. Maybe she should have just supported him, told him he was talented and could handle any job. But she couldn't lie. She saw his work every day and knew his strengths and weaknesses. Keisha looked at the clock. 5 in the morning. In 3 hours, they needed to be at the restaurant. They had the morning shift, prep for lunch. Finally, when the sky outside the window began to lighten, she heard a familiar sound. A car drove into the courtyard. Keisha jumped off the sofa and ran to the window. Yes, it was a taxi. Marcus climbed out of the car with difficulty, swaying. Even from here, it was clear he was drunk. Keisha rushed to the door, opened it, and stepped out onto the landing. A minute later, heavy footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Someone stumbled and cursed. Marcus slowly climbed the stairs, holding onto the railing. When he reached their floor, Keisha saw his face, red, with a dull gaze. He reeked of stale alcohol and cheap whiskey. "What are you doing?" she hissed, helping him enter the apartment. "The shift starts in 3 hours, and you can't even stand on your feet." Contempt boiled inside her. How could he? How could he act so irresponsibly? It wasn't just disrespect toward her. It was disrespect toward the work, the restaurant, his colleagues. Marcus pushed her hand away and, stumbling, walked into the bedroom. He fell onto the bed right in his clothes, not even taking off his shoes. "Now everything will be my way," he managed to say with difficulty, and his eyes closed. Keisha stood in the bedroom doorway, looking at her sleeping husband. She felt a strange mix of anger, pity, and some vague fear. What did he mean by those words? "Now everything will be my way." She rolled her eyes, turned around, and left the room, quietly closing the door. At that moment, she didn't even suspect what difficulties she would have to face in the future. She didn't understand that this night would be the beginning of something terrible. 5 days passed since that fight in the car. Marcus acted as if nothing had happened. In the morning, he woke up, they ate breakfast in silence, and drove to work. In the kitchen, he performed his duties but barely spoke to Keisha, and in the evenings, he went out somewhere again, returning late at night. Keisha tried not to pay attention to it, burying herself in work. She came up with new recipes, experimented with food combinations, tried to surprise the restaurant's patrons. For many years, she had done this with ease. It was like she felt which flavors would harmonize with each other, which spices to add, so the dish would sparkle with new colors. But now, something had gone wrong. On Tuesday morning, Keisha was preparing a new sauce for fish. She added basil, lemon juice, capers, and a little white wine. Usually, she tasted every ingredient separately, feeling how they unfolded on the tongue. But today, the flavors seemed muffled, as if she were tasting food through a layer of cotton. "Strange," she muttered, frowning. LaToya, who was standing nearby peeling vegetables, raised her head. "What's strange?" "The sauce is kind of flat." Keisha scooped up a spoon and tasted it again. Not enough brightness. Maybe add more lemon? In my opinion, it's acidic enough as it is, LaToya noted. Keisha shrugged and added a little more lemon juice. Then a little more. She tried to catch that exact balance she usually felt intuitively, but the taste still seemed insufficiently expressed. During lunch, the first waiter returned to the kitchen with a plate of almost untouched fish. "The guest says the sauce is too sour," he reported, placing the plate on the counter, asking to replace the dish. Keisha looked at the plate in surprise. She took a clean spoon and tasted the sauce. To her, it still seemed normal, even a bit bland. "Okay, make him something else," she sighed. The next day, the situation repeated itself. Keisha was preparing a steak with pepper sauce, but several customers complained the meat was oversalted. She tasted it herself. To her, there wasn't enough salt. "Trey, did you definitely add as much salt as I said?" she asked her assistant. "Yes, chef," the young cook nodded. "Exactly that much." Keisha frowned. Something was wrong. She started noticing that smells had also become less distinct. Before, she could identify which spices were added to a dish with her eyes closed just by sniffing it. Now, aromas mixed into some blurry mass where it was hard to distinguish individual notes. On Wednesday, Mr. Henderson burst into the kitchen with such fury on his face that all the cooks froze. "Keisha!" he barked. "I need to talk to you. Immediately." She wiped her hands on a towel and walked over to him. "What's the matter?" "Here is the matter." He put a plate of baked salmon on the counter. "Customers are complaining about the bitterness of this dish. And this is not the first case this week. What is happening with you?" His voice sounded so loud that the whole kitchen heard every word. Keisha felt blood rushing to her face. She took a fork and knife, cut a piece of salmon, and put it in her mouth. She chewed slowly, trying to recognize the flavors. Fish, lemon, rosemary. But she didn't feel any bitterness. "I don't feel any bitterness at all," she said, surprised. Mr. Henderson squinted distrustfully. "How is that? You don't feel it." Following her, Marcus walked up to the counter. He took another fork, broke off a piece, and tasted it. His face immediately twisted. "Honey, are you serious?" He widened his eyes, looking at her. "It tastes disgusting. Someone clearly overdid it with something here." Keisha looked confusedly from her husband to the manager. Why did they feel what she didn't? "Maybe I'm just tired," she muttered. "I've been working a lot the last few days." "Tired?" Mr. Henderson crossed his arms over his chest. "Keisha, you are the executive chef. You cannot afford such mistakes. The restaurant's reputation suffers because of you." "I understand," she answered quietly. "It won't happen again." Mr. Henderson stood a little longer, drilling her with his gaze, and then turned and left, slamming the door loudly. An awkward silence hung in the kitchen. Everyone pretended to be busy with their tasks, but Keisha felt their eyes on her. "Let's get back to work," she said, trying to make her voice sound confident, but inside she was shrinking with anxiety. What was happening to her? The rest of the day, Keisha tried to be especially careful. She asked LaToya and Trey to taste every dish before serving, trusting their opinion more than her own sensations. It was humiliating. She, a recognized chef, the star of the restaurant, couldn't trust her own taste buds. In the evening, when the shift was coming to an end, Keisha noticed a strange thing. She stepped into the pantry for spices, and when she returned, she saw Marcus leaning over a pot of her signature mushroom sauce. He was pouring something into it from a small packet, quickly stirred it, and stepped away as if nothing was happening. "Marcus, what were you doing?" Keisha asked, walking closer. He flinched and turned around. Something resembling fear flitted across his face, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Added a little salt," he replied. "It seemed to me the sauce needed it." "I didn't ask you to do that," Keisha frowned. "Well, sorry," Marcus shrugged. "Just wanted to help." He took a tray of ready dishes and carried it into the dining room. Keisha looked at the pot of sauce. Something here was wrong. Marcus had never interfered with her recipes without permission before. Never. She scooped up a spoonful of sauce and tasted it. The flavor seemed normal to her, even bland. But when waiters brought back a complaint about oversalted sauce at the end of the evening, Keisha felt suspicion creeping in. On Thursday morning, Mr. Coleman, the owner of the restaurant, called her to his office. He was a solid man in his 60s, with a mop of gray hair and kind but strict eyes. Keisha had known him for 10 years. He was the one who gave her the chance to become head chef back in the day. She entered his office feeling her heart pounding. Mr. Coleman sat at a massive wooden desk, sorting through some papers. "Have a seat, Keisha." He nodded at the chair opposite. She sat down, squeezing her hands on her knees. "Mr. Coleman, I understand there were problems this week, but—" "Keisha," he interrupted her, taking off his glasses and wiping them with a handkerchief. "I have received 17 complaints in the last 5 days. 17. Some of them from our regular clients who have been coming here for years." "I know," she answered quietly. "I don't understand what's happening. I'm having some issues with my taste sensations." Mr. Coleman looked at her closely. "Have you been to a doctor?" "No, not yet. I thought it was temporary, just overwork." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Keisha, you need to rest." "Seriously, rest. But I can't leave the restaurant right now," she protested. "We have so many orders for next week." "Keisha," Mr. Coleman said decisively, "it is time for you to rest. This is not a request. This is a decision." She felt everything go cold inside. "But—" "No buts." He raised a hand, stopping her objection. "Marcus will replace you for now. I am sure your husband will manage no worse than you. He has been working here for a year, knows all the recipes, knows the team. A week of rest, and you will return in shape." Keisha sat there, unable to utter a word. She was being suspended from the work that was the meaning of her life, from the kitchen that was her second home. "I will give you a paid week," Mr. Coleman continued softer. "Go somewhere, relax, go to the doctor, and then come back to us. We are waiting for you, Keisha. You are the best cook I know, but right now, you need a break." She nodded, not trusting her voice. She stood up and silently left the office. In the corridor, Keisha leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Tears welled up in her throat, but she held them back. She couldn't cry here, at work. She went down to the kitchen, where prep for lunch was already underway. Marcus stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan. When he saw her, a strange smile flickered on his face. "So, did you talk to the boss?" he asked. "They are sending me on vacation for a week," Keisha replied, trying to speak evenly. "You will be temporarily filling my duties." Marcus nodded, but in his eyes she saw something resembling satisfaction. Or did she just imagine it? "I see," he said. "You really need a rest. Lately you've been kind of scattered." Keisha didn't answer anything. She took off her apron, hung it on a hook, and left through the back door without saying goodbye to anyone. It was cold outside. The November wind cut right through, but Keisha decided to walk home. She needed time to think over everything happening. She walked along the gray streets, head down, going over the events of the last few days in her mind. What could have gone wrong? Why did she start having problems with taste sensations? It couldn't be just fatigue. Something was wrong. Keisha remembered how Marcus poured something into her sauce, how strangely he had been behaving lately, how after that fight in the car he said, "Now everything will be my way." Could it be? No, that was madness. Marcus, her husband. They had been together 7 years. He couldn't consciously harm her. Couldn't. But the suspicion born in her consciousness wouldn't let go. Reaching home, Keisha went up to the apartment, undressed and lay on the sofa, covering herself with a blanket. She felt empty, as if something very important had been taken from her. Her phone vibrated. A message from Latoya. "Keisha, what happened? You left so abruptly." "Everything is fine." Keisha looked at the screen, but didn't reply. She didn't know what to say, how to explain something she didn't understand herself. Rain was starting outside the window. Drops drummed on the glass, creating a monotonous rhythm. Keisha closed her eyes, trying to calm the trembling in her hands. What was happening to her? And most importantly, who was to blame for this? Keisha sat in the living room with a glass of red wine, looking out the window at the night city. Streetlights blurred through the raindrops on the glass, creating bizarre patterns. She was alone, and with every minute, the silence in the apartment became heavier. Thoughts about what happened spun in her head: suspension from work, loss of taste, Marcus's strange behavior. It all added up to some creepy mosaic she was afraid to assemble completely. Keisha took another sip of wine. It seemed almost tasteless to her. She barely distinguished the tartness and slight acidity. Before, she could determine the grape variety, the region of production, the harvest year. And now it was just red liquid. The front door lock clicked. Keisha didn't even turn her head. Marcus walked into the hallway, kicked off his shoes and jacket, and a minute later appeared in the living room. A satisfied smile played on his face. "Hi, honey." He leaned down and pecked her on the top of her head. "You have no idea what kind of day it was." Keisha silently raised her gaze to him. "Everything went just perfectly," Marcus continued, not noticing her mood. He paced the room, gesturing. "Mr. Henderson personally came up to me after lunch and said he hadn't seen such coordinated work in the kitchen in a long time. Can you imagine?" "Happy for you," Keisha replied quietly. "And that's not all." He sat in the chair opposite. His eyes shone with excitement. "You know the Walkers, the couple that always books a table with us on Fridays? Well, they specifically asked to pass a compliment to the chef. Said my steak was the best they've tried in the last month." Keisha squeezed the glass hard in her hand. "In the last month, you say?" she asked again. "Well, yeah." Marcus didn't catch the sarcasm in her voice. "I told you I could do it. You just needed to give me a chance." "A chance," Keisha repeated, "which you got thanks to my problems." Marcus finally noticed the tension in her voice. His smile faded slightly. "Keisha, come on. I'm not to blame that you started having difficulties. It's just a coincidence." "A coincidence?" She drained the glass and put it on the table. "A very convenient coincidence, right?" "What are you talking about?" Marcus frowned. Keisha stood up and headed to the bedroom without answering. She didn't want to fight right now. No strength. She felt devastated, as if she had been squeezed like a lemon and thrown away. In the bedroom, she changed into pajamas and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts spun in a circle, one more anxious than the other. What if her taste doesn't return? What if this is forever? How will she live without her profession? Half an hour later, Marcus peeked into the bedroom. He was holding a cup of tea in his hands. "I made you tea again," he said softly, approaching the bed. "Drink it. You'll calm down. You need to get some sleep." Keisha looked at the cup. Chamomile tea, their usual ritual before bed. For the last few weeks, Marcus made her tea every evening, and she really did sleep better, soundly, without dreams, falling into darkness like into a whirlpool. "Thanks." She took the cup. The tea was hot and steamy. However, she barely distinguished the smell. Keisha took a few sips. The taste was weak, barely perceptible. "Everything will be fine." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and stroked her hair. "A week of rest, and you'll return to normal. You'll see." His voice sounded soothing, but something in it made Keisha wary. She couldn't explain what exactly, just some note that sounded false. Keisha finished the tea and put the cup on the nightstand. Within a few minutes, she started drifting off. A heavy, viscous sleep rolled over her in waves. "Good night, honey," she heard Marcus's voice from somewhere far away. She wanted to answer, but her tongue wouldn't obey. Her eyelids became unbearably heavy. The last thing she remembered was Marcus turning off the light and leaving the room. In the morning, Keisha woke up with a heavy head. Her mouth was dry, her body ached as if she had been hauling sacks of flour all night. She sat up on the bed with difficulty and looked at the clock. 10 in the morning. Marcus wasn't home. He had already left for the restaurant. Keisha got up, washed her face with cold water, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, pale skin, a dull gaze. She got dressed and decided to go to the doctor. This could not be put off any longer. Something was happening to her body, and she needed to find out exactly what. The urgent care clinic was a 20-minute walk away. Keisha registered at the front desk and sat in line for a general practitioner. Around her, people coughed, sniffled, complained of pain. The usual picture of a November clinic. Finally, she was called. The doctor's office was small and cluttered. A man in his 50s sat at the desk with a tired face and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. "Have a seat," he nodded. "What is bothering you?" Keisha sat on the chair opposite and began to tell him about how she suddenly started losing taste and smell, about how she couldn't fall asleep without tea, and after drinking it, sleepiness hit her so hard she fell into oblivion. "Doctor, are you sure you checked everything properly?" she asked after the examination. "I can't sleep without my tea at night. Before I didn't have this, but now as soon as I drink tea, I sleep like the dead." The doctor looked at her closely over his glasses. "And I also started having problems with smells and tastes," Keisha continued. "They almost disappeared. I feel almost nothing, and for me, this is a catastrophe. I am a chef. Without taste, I cannot work." The doctor leaned back in his chair and was silent for a few seconds, contemplating something. "Tell me," he finally asked cautiously, "does your husband make this tea for you?" The question caught Keisha off guard. She blinked. "Yes," she nodded. "What does that have to do with it?" The doctor took off his glasses and began wiping them with a handkerchief. His face became serious. "You see," he began slowly, "the symptoms you are describing can be caused by various reasons. Viral infections, hormonal imbalances, stress, but the combination of loss of taste and smell with severe drowsiness after consuming a specific drink, this is concerning." Keisha felt something clench inside. "What are you trying to say?" "I cannot state for sure." The doctor put his glasses back on. "But I have a suspicion. Some substances with regular use can cause exactly these symptoms. Sleeping pills in large doses, for example, or certain tranquilizers." "You think my husband is putting something in my tea?" Keisha laughed, but the laugh came out nervous. "That's absurd. Why would he do that?" The doctor shrugged. "I don't know your family circumstances, but my advice to you is this. Do not drink what he brings you tonight, at least to check. But if my suspicions are correct, you will feel better by morning." Keisha walked out of the clinic in a state of shock. She walked down the street without seeing the path, and the doctor's words sounded in her head like a drumbeat. Could Marcus really be putting something in her tea? But why? Although, wait, what if it wasn't just revenge for her words in the car? What if it was a plan, worsen her work to take her place? Keisha stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Passers-by walked around her, casting annoyed glances, but she paid no attention. A chain of events was building in her head. Their fight. His words. Now everything will be my way. Loss of taste, complaints about her dishes, suspension from work. Marcus in her place. Did he plan it all? No, that was madness. Marcus couldn't. He loved her. They were husband and wife. But a small voice inside whispered, "Remember how he poured something into your sauce. Remember how happy he returned home when you got suspended." Keisha returned home and spent the whole day in thought. She tried to convince herself the doctor was wrong, that it was just a coincidence, that Marcus was incapable of such a thing. But the more she thought, the more details surfaced in her memory. How strange he acted the last month. How he insisted she drink the tea. How every morning she woke up broken and tired. In the evening, Marcus returned home again in high spirits. "Keisha, I have news for you," he announced, barely crossing the threshold. Mr. Coleman said today that if the week goes just as well, he'll think about raising my salary." "How nice," Keisha answered dryly. She was lying in the bedroom, pretending to read a book. In reality, she had been rereading the same page for 20 minutes, not understanding a word. "Why so gloomy?" Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. "I thought you'd be happy for me." "I'm tired," Keisha answered, not lifting her eyes from the book. "I get it." He stood up. "Then I'll go make you tea right now. You need to get a good night's sleep." Keisha felt her heart beat faster. This is it, the moment of truth. "No need," she said. "Today I'll go without." "But you always drink tea before bed," Marcus was surprised. "Don't want to today," she insisted. "Keisha, you know without tea you'll be tossing and turning all night." His voice became more insistent. "Let me make it quickly. It'll take 2 minutes." "Fine," Keisha threw out sharply, finally looking up. Marcus froze. Something flashed across his face. Irritation? Fear? But he quickly pulled himself together. He left the bedroom, but Keisha heard him walking around the apartment. She put down the book and listened. The sound of pouring water, the clinking of dishes. What is he doing there? Keisha got up and tiptoed to the door. She looked out into the corridor. Marcus stood in the kitchen with his back to her. He poured something into the cup from a small packet, then poured boiling water and stirred. Keisha's heart pounded so loudly she thought he would hear. She quickly returned to bed and picked up the book, pretending to read. Marcus entered the bedroom with the cup in his hands. "I made it," he said. "Just in case you change your mind, here it is on the nightstand." He put the cup next to the bed and smiled, but that smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good night, honey." He left, and Keisha heard him settling in the living room in front of the TV. She looked at the cup of tea, a harmless white cup of chamomile tea. Or was there something else in there? Keisha decided to check. She picked up the cup, smelled it. The smell of chamomile was weak, barely distinguishable. She didn't smell anything else. But what if there was something odorless in there? She got up, went to the bathroom, poured the tea into the sink, and returned to the bedroom. She put the cup back on the nightstand as if she had drunk it, and lay down, pretending to be asleep. Now all that remained was to wait. Keisha lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the apartment. Marcus was still sitting in the living room. She heard the muffled sound of the TV, occasionally the creak of the sofa. The clock on the nightstand showed 11:30. She closed her eyes, pretending to sleep, but sleep didn't even think of coming. Adrenaline boiled in her blood, forcing her heart to beat faster. About an hour passed. The TV turned off. Keisha heard Marcus get up, pace the living room. His footsteps approached the bedroom. She squeezed her eyes shut tighter, trying to breathe evenly and deeply, as sleeping people breathe. The door creaked quietly. Marcus looked into the bedroom. Keisha felt his gaze on her. For a few seconds, he stood on the threshold, then quietly closed the door and walked away. She waited another minute, then cautiously opened her eyes. Light from the living room seeped through the crack under the door, meaning he hadn't gone to bed. What is he doing there? Keisha heard strange rustling sounds. Something creaked, something fell with a dull thud. Then silence again, and rustling again. Curiosity won over caution. Keisha quietly threw off the blanket and sat up on the bed. The floor under her feet was cold. She stood up, trying not to make a sound, and tiptoed to the door. The door was slightly ajar. Keisha carefully looked into the crack. What she saw made her freeze. Marcus was standing by the huge bookcase that took up the entire wall in the living room. This bookcase was Keisha's pride. She collected recipe books, memoirs of famous chefs, rare editions on cooking. Right now, Marcus was methodically going through the books, taking them out, flipping through, and putting them back. He was clearly looking for something. Keisha held her breath. Her husband moved nervously, frantically. He pulled several books off the shelf at once, looked behind them, checking if there was anything else there. Then he squatted down, looking at the bottom shelves. At that moment, his phone rang. Marcus jerked in surprise, almost dropping a book. He grabbed the phone, looked at the screen, and quickly answered, "I'm listening." His voice was quiet, tense. Keisha pressed against the door, trying to hear every word. "I'm looking for that damn book," Marcus continued irritably. "How should I know where my wife could have hidden it?" Keisha covered her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming in surprise. "What book? Why does he need it?" "No, I haven't found it yet." Marcus nervously paced the room. "Listen, there are hundreds of books here. How am I supposed to know which exact one is needed?" Pause. He listened to the interlocutor, and his face became gloomier. "I understand time is running out," he hissed through his teeth, "but I am doing everything I can. Listen, give me a few more days. I'll find it soon, I promise." Another pause. "Yes, I understand. Without the book, the deal is off." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "But I can't just go and ask her. She'll immediately realize something is wrong." Keisha felt a cold fury growing inside her. What deal? What are they talking about? And then it hit her. Grandpa's book. The old leather book her grandfather gave her before he died. He was a famous chef, and everyone thought his secret recipes were kept in that book. "Fine, I'll call when I find it." Marcus ended the call and shoved the phone into his pocket. He returned to the bookcase and continued searching even more feverishly, pulling out books, shaking them, looking inside the covers. Keisha couldn't stay silent anymore. She threw the door open and walked into the living room, crossing her arms over her chest. "So that's why you give me tea?" Her voice sounded cold and clear. "You're mixing in sleeping pills and something else, because of which my taste buds got dulled?" Marcus jerked in surprise so sharply that the book fell out of his hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. He turned around, and Keisha saw a mixture of fear and guilt on his face. I... He opened and closed his mouth like a fish thrown on the shore. "What you?" Keisha slowly walked toward him, anger blazing in her eyes. "You were poisoning me, purposely ruining my dishes in the kitchen, all to take my place, and now you're stealing too?" "No, you don't understand," Marcus started. "Don't understand?" She laughed, but there wasn't a drop of amusement in that laugh. "Oh, I understand perfectly. And who needs my grandfather's book?" Marcus was silent, looking away. "Answer me!" Her voice got louder. "Who was on the other end of the line? Who did you promise my family heirloom to?" "It's complicated," Marcus muttered. "Complicated." Keisha stepped closer, looking him straight in the eyes. "Doesn't it seem to you that poisoning your own wife is also complicated? Or did you do that with ease?" Marcus clenched his fists. Irritation flashed across his face, quickly replaced by resolve. "Me," he blurted out, finally meeting her gaze. "I need the book." "Why?" Keisha crossed her arms over her chest. "I'm tired of being in your shadow." His voice broke into a scream. 7 years I lived next to you and heard only one thing. Keisha Vance, culinary genius. Keisha came up with a new recipe. Keisha won an award. And I was always just Keisha's husband. "And that gives you the right to poison me?" she asked coldly. "I didn't want to hurt you," Marcus protested. I needed to prove that I can be better, that I'm worth something too." "Prove to whom?" She narrowed her eyes. "To yourself? Or to the one calling you on the phone?" Marcus licked his lips. He clearly didn't want to answer, but the words tore out on their own. "Competitors. The owners of the new restaurant. They promised if I find your grandfather's book with the secret recipes, they would hire me as executive chef with a good salary. With recognition." Keisha shook her head, not believing what she heard. "You really thought there are some secrets in Grandpa's book?" "Well, aren't there?" Marcus became alert. "Everyone says your grandfather was a genius, that he had special recipes he didn't reveal to anyone." "Yes, he had special recipes," Keisha nodded, "but he never wrote them down." She walked to the bookcase and crouched in front of the bottom shelf. Her fingers slid over the spines of the books until they found the right one, an old leather book in a worn binding. Keisha pulled it out and stood up. "Here it is." She held the book out to Marcus. "What you were so desperately looking for." Marcus grabbed the book with both hands. His eyes lit up with greedy fire. He opened it, started quickly flipping through the pages, and with every turned page, his face became more puzzled. "What is this?" he finally exhaled. Keisha smirked. "What you were looking for." There wasn't a single recipe in the book. Page after page, only notes made by grandfather's hand. Phrases of support, motivational quotes, memories. "My dear Keisha, remember, true talent is not in recipes, but in the heart. Never be afraid to experiment, granddaughter. The best dishes are born from courage. You will become a great cook not because you know secrets, but because you feel the food." Marcus flipped through the whole book to the end and slammed it shut. "Where are the recipes?" His voice trembled. "Where are the secrets? And you thought you'd find kitchen secrets there?" Keisha laughed, and bitterness sounded in that laugh. "Honey, to become a famous chef, you need to know how to combine products and flavors. It's like a gift. Either you have it or you don't." She walked closer, looking into his face. "I have it," she continued quietly. "And you? You will always be in the background because on your own, you can't create anything sensible. You are used to waiting only for approval. You don't know how to risk, experiment. You're afraid to make a mistake." "What?" Marcus narrowed his eyes, clutching the book in his hands. "That is exactly why you will never become a great chef," Keisha continued ruthlessly. "Not because you don't have talent, but because you don't have the guts. You prefer to follow beaten paths, repeat other people's recipes, do what has already proven effective." Marcus threw the book on the sofa. "This is all your fault," he shouted. "You never gave me a chance. Always commanded, always decided for me." "I gave you a job when you got fired," Keisha snapped. "I tried to support you." "You put me under your command." Marcus jabbed a finger in her direction. "You turned me into your subordinate, into a shadow." "And you turned me into a victim of your own ambitions," Keisha yelled. "You poisoned me, put sleeping pills in my tea, and God knows what else. You purposely ruined my dishes in the kitchen. You destroyed my career." "I didn't want to," Marcus began. "Didn't want to?" She walked very close. "And what did you want? To steal Grandpa's book? To get someone else's recipes and pass them off as your own? To become a great chef with someone else's hands?" Marcus was silent, hanging his head. "You know what's saddest?" Keisha continued quieter. "You could have become a good chef if you stopped looking back at me. If you believed in yourself. But instead you chose the easy way. Betrayal." "Keisha." He tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "And now, get out of my apartment." Her voice became icy. "I won't tolerate traitors. Pack your things and leave, right now." "Wait, let's talk." Marcus took a step toward her. "Don't come near me," Keisha warned. "You have 10 minutes to pack the essentials. I'll send the rest later." "Keisha, I beg you." Pleading notes appeared in his voice. 9 minutes, 30 seconds. She looked at her watch. Marcus realized arguing was useless. He walked into the bedroom and started packing. Keisha heard him opening and closing closets, shoving something into a bag. She stood in the living room looking at Grandpa's book, at the book because of which her marriage collapsed. Although, no, not because of the book, because of greed, envy, and betrayal. 8 minutes later, Marcus walked out of the bedroom with a large sports bag. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "We have to discuss everything. Divorce, division of property." "We'll discuss it," Keisha nodded. "Through lawyers." Marcus wanted to say something but changed his mind. He put on his jacket, took the car keys, and headed to the door. At the threshold, he turned around. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Keisha didn't answer. She just looked at him with a cold gaze until he walked out and closed the door behind him. When the sound of his footsteps faded on the stairs, Keisha finally allowed herself to relax. She sank onto the sofa, took Grandpa's book in her hands, and opened it to the first page. To my favorite granddaughter, a real chef cooks with the heart, not by a recipe. Tears welled up in her eyes, but Keisha smiled through them. Grandfather was right, and she would prove it. A week later, she returned to the restaurant with new strength and ideas, and Marcus was fired after they found out what he planned to do. Since then, Keisha gained even more fame, while Marcus could only find a job in an ordinary cafeteria. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It would mean a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now and let's keep spending time together. Much love. See you soon.